Typhoon Yagi, now recognized as Vietnam's strongest storm in 3 decades, has affected millions of people, cut off power to 1.5 million people and left widespread devastation in its path. As of now, more than 400 people in Vietnam have died due to Typhoon Yagi. The Vietnamese government has been trying to work with the people to overcome the storm and floods. A number of domestic and international charities have donated money and essential supplies to help people in the flood-hit areas overcome difficulties. We must also acknowledge the mutual support and brotherhood of all the people in Vietnam. No matter what the circumstances, they still work together to overcome difficulties. As their proverb says, the healthy leaves cover the torn leaves. Super Typhoon Yagi, a major storm that has devastated Southeast Asia, made landfall on the northeastern coast of Vietnam on Saturday, leaving a path of destruction in its path. The storm unleashed its fury on industrial and residential areas, bringing with it relentless rains that caused severe flooding and landslides. Before making landfall in Vietnam, Typhoon Yagi wreaked havoc in the Philippines and southern China's Hainan province, adding to the region's woes. As the storm swept across Vietnam, thousands of residents found themselves stranded on rooftops in northern provinces where floodwaters rose rapidly. The devastation was made clear in dramatic dashcam footage on Monday. In Phu Tho province, the Phong Chau Bridge, submerged in floodwaters, collapsed, sending several vehicles plunging into the river below. By late Tuesday, the Red River in Hanoi was rising at an alarming rate of 10 centimeters per hour, adding to fears of further flooding in the nation's capital. In a controversial development, while the Vietnamese government has attributed some of the flooding to the natural aftermath of Typhoon Yagi, local residents in Vietnam have expressed concern about the release of floodwaters from Chinese reservoirs. Some believe that China's opening of floodgates along the border has exacerbated the situation, contributing to the catastrophic flooding in northern Vietnam. Meanwhile, southern China has also been severely affected by the remnants of Typhoon Yagi. Guangxi province has been hit by heavy rains for several days in a row, causing water levels in many rivers to exceed warning levels. Urban areas and towns in Chongsua City have been flooded suddenly, trapping people and threatening their livelihoods. The heavy rainfall, caused by the storm's residual cloud system, has caused widespread flooding, especially along the Zhuojiang River in Guangxi. Although Typhoon Yagi has weakened to a tropical depression, its lingering impacts continue to threaten communities. Authorities have issued warnings that the storm will continue to wreak havoc as it moves west, with further flooding and landslides predicted. The storm initially brought strong winds, which destroyed critical infrastructure, including bridges, while ripping roofs off homes, disabling factories and leaving large swaths of farmland and urban centers underwater. The devastation was severe and the extent of the damage is still being assessed. The Vietnamese government is scrambling to respond, issuing flood and landslide warnings for 401 communes in 18 northern provinces. In Thanh Nguyen and Yen by provinces, single-story houses were completely submerged, with many residents forced to retreat to their rooftops to escape rising waters. Emergency response teams are working tirelessly to rescue those trapped, but the situation remains dire, with entire villages cut off from aid. In response to the disaster, more than 4,600 troops have been deployed to the worst-hit areas to assist with evacuation efforts and provide aid to flood victims. Military personnel are working alongside local emergency services to rescue stranded residents, distribute supplies and clear debris from blocked roads. The government has yet to release an official estimate of the economic damage, but preliminary reports suggest it will be extensive. Many residents in coastal cities where the storm first made landfall in Vietnam have reported losing their homes, businesses, and personal belongings to the storm. Entire communities in these areas have been devastated, with millions of families now homeless, without water and food. This storm is seen as a harbinger of what could become a more frequent and devastating phenomenon in the future, especially in vulnerable areas such as Southeast Asia, where communities are often ill-prepared for such disasters. With the current difficulties, people in flood-hit areas, especially in the northern provinces of Vietnam, are in dire need of help from people around the world. Hopefully, with everyone's help and the resilient spirit of the Vietnamese people overcoming difficulties, they will overcome this tragedy. In another development, due to the impact of Typhoon Yagi and the release of floodwaters from hydroelectric reservoirs on the Chinese side, the water level in Vietnam's rivers has risen, even very high, to level 3, the highest level of alarm in this country. Some Chinese ships have followed the floodwaters down to Vietnam, obstructing the flow and endangering bridges. In particular, the rising floodwaters and Chinese ships will endanger traffic participants, as well as the relief and recovery work. Some people in mountainous areas and ethnic minorities are being severely affected by this storm and flood. The government of this country is trying to quickly help people find shelter when their houses and properties are eroded and swept away by floodwaters. Vietnamese people are also helping their brothers in the storm and flood areas so that they have food and clothing and can soon stabilize their lives. In China, Typhoon Yagi, with winds of 240 kilometers per hour, blew away everything in its path, causing heavy damage to people and property. Trees were broken, shops were blown away, and companies were also severely affected. In some places, the glass panels of high-rise buildings were even blown away by the wind. After the storm, the floodwaters returned, combined with the release of water from hydroelectric reservoirs, causing some houses, motorbikes, and cars to be swept away. The scene was heartbreaking and terrifying. This is probably one of the strongest storms ever to directly affect this country.
The situation has posed challenges for both residents.
vào đâu, đem đâu, vào đâu.